Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Freeman Files here on the J Free 906 podcast. Tonight, we are going to be stepping beyond our world a little bit and going into part of the Freeman Files where we look into UFOs, UAPs, and aliens and that sort of thing. And our guest tonight, well, first of all, I want to introduce, as most of you know, Jimm Kjelgaard, and we also have Dustin Eskelsen. Dustin, thank you for joining us tonight. You go ahead. There you go. Dustin is the director for the state of Utah, MUFON. And I met Dustin when we were out at Phenomicon. Did I meet you the first time I went out, the second year, or the 2 years ago?
Yeah. We run into each other all the time there, so it all kind of blurs together.
I know, right? It has. I've been to the last. There's been 4, and I've been to the 3 of them. And we just lost Jim. He froze there, so he'll be back.
He'll be back.
But yeah, so thank you for coming on tonight. It's been a one of these things where I really wanted to speak with you because one of my favorite subjects. We'll bring Jim back. Oh, there's Jim. Yeah. Talk about internet connection.
They don't want us talking about what we're going to talk about tonight. So
I know, right? So first of all, I wanted to say thank you, folks, for joining us here tonight. We really appreciate your coming on board and participating in our conversation with Dustin tonight. As always, I'd like to say, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click on that notification bell so you know right when we have new content coming out. And if you like the content of what we're doing tonight, give us a thumbs up. That helps all the YouTube algorithms and all that stuff. We really appreciate it. There's that thumb again. So, Dustin, thank you so much. And I know you met Mr. Stetson himself at my booth that I had at Phenomicon a couple of years ago. Mr. Jimm Kjelgaard.
Yep.
So one of the things that I have always been very involved in over the years and haven't talked about it too much, but lately a little bit more here on the podcast is UFOs and UAPs and the possibility of life off-world, outside of our world here on Earth. Big believer that life does exist elsewhere in this universe. And I am a big believer that we have been visited by some of those. And MUFON was always I guess it was founded in 1969, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And all over the years of that, I've never really dug into it or been a member, but I find it very fascinating. So Jim and I are going to kind of just chat it up here with you a little bit tonight. We're going to look at some of the evidence that you have to share with us. But tell us a little bit about Dustin and how did you get started with all this? Was it a fascination when you were younger that turned into being a director at MUFON?
Sure. So it's relatively new, me getting into this. Actually, it's sort of a weird way that I fell into this. There's a musician named Jason Molina who I just absolutely love. And in one of the songs, he talks about Will-o'-the-Wisp. And I didn't know what that was. So I was bored one day at work, not a lot to do. And I Googled, what is Will-o'-the-Wisp? And I found out that it's sort of lights that you may see in swamp areas, in the forest. In ancient times, they describe them as being fairies flying through the forest. And how naive and how far I've come now. I thought that, you could go to like some of these swampy areas, almost like Old Faithful. You could go out on these trips and see Will-o'-the-Wisp, right? Like they could take you to these areas and see the swamp gas. So I started Googling, almost like taking a vacation, saying where to see Will-o'-the-Wisp. So a website comes up, top 10 places or whatever to see Will-o'-the-Wisp.
Right.
So number 10 was I think it was somewhere in Florida. So I go, okay, they got swampy areas there. Mm-hmm. But then it started getting into UFOs and aliens. And I go, what is this? And I went to number 9, and I think it was Louisiana. I go, okay, that's swampy area too. Let me read through it. Once again, UFOs. So I go, I don't want this. This is weird. What's going on here? So I literally scrolled. The curiosity in me said, well, let me just see what number 1 is. Mm-hmm. Scroll all the way down to number 1. Number 1 place, according to this website, to see Will-o'-the-Wisp, it said Skinwalker Ranch, Utah.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. And I go,
Lucy,
what? I grew up in Utah. I've been here my entire life. I go, there's no swamps here. What is this about? So I started reading about the Shermans and everything they encountered. And it just sort of I was like, what? How is this possible? And that was my entrance into the rabbit hole. having Skinwalker Ranch be my backyard. Had I grew up in any other state, I probably wouldn't have read it. I probably wouldn't have cared about it. But once I started reading about it, it grabbed onto me like nothing else. And I started going down that UFO rabbit hole. Years later, I found out about MUFON and became just a member. I just wanted to look at their database. When you're a member, you can kind of search the database and look at the cases that people submitted and any images and videos they attach with it. And then just sort of said, hey, you want to be a field investigator? And I was like, oh, wow, like that would be awesome. So I signed up and did the whole course and never turned back since, and just sort of like worked my way up and been working cases, and now I'm the state director, and yeah, I just love it. It's a great organization. And I love what we do and what we provide for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you, that's it is. And it's funny that you mentioned, I had no idea, you know, Skinwalker Ranch, you know, and immediately, you know, you heard me say Lucy because Lucy is the name of the you know, and I look at Will-O-Wisp from games, from, you know, being a gamer, you know, playing games, you see Will-O-Wisp and it's just a little ball of light that floats around and does different things and has intelligence and all of that. So that's interesting. Yeah. What do you think, Jim, about Lucy at Skinwalker?
Yeah. Well, Dustin's his experience is very, very parallel to mine.
Really?
I began, you know, like you, Jeff. My belief in you. I always had an interest, a casual interest, but didn't really think one way or the other if these things were really real, like if there was really the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe visiting us. The fact that there's life elsewhere, I've always accepted that there's just mathematically, it's all but a certainty that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the cosmos. But I didn't really start going down the rabbit hole until really after 2017, when that bombshell New York Times article came out, where finally the Pentagon admitted, okay, even though we've denied it vehemently for the last, you know, 30, 40 years, yeah, okay, we never stopped investigating UFOs, and yeah, they're real, but we still don't know what they are. And so that kind of got me going deeper, taking a deeper dive and learning more about it. And Skinwalker Ranch, I moved to Utah from upstate New York uh, exactly 30 years ago. And so the years ago, I want to say about 96, the Salt Lake Tribune or Deseret News, one of the two main newspapers in Utah, published a story on the Sherman's experience at Skinwalker Ranch, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And then several years later, George Knapp and Colm Kelleher published The Hunt for the Skinwalker book. And so from that moment on, I had a very keen interest in Skinwalker Ranch, and I'd never been there. I knew roughly where it was, but then all this stuff started happening with the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch TV series back in, what was it, 2020 or thereabouts, and just Jeff, we've all kind of gone down this Skinwalker Ranch rabbit hole together and discovered not only these truly amazing phenomena that are out there that are very real, whatever quote unquote they are, but also we found ourselves in the midst of an absolutely wonderful community of people, with not just the Skinwalker Ranch insiders, but also so many wonderful friends and people that we've met at functions like Phenomicon, and of course all the wonderful people we have here in your chat. So it's been awesome. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, and that's interesting. That, you know, both of you guys, I envy you, because I honestly, I love Utah. I think Utah is a wonderful state. I love the everything about it. It's just so cool. I mean, you got so many things to go and do and see, but then you also have, you know, Skinwalker Ranch there. And so, you know, yes, it's closed to the public. You're not allowed to go over there and all that, but still to be, and we've mentioned this many times talking about this, and Dustin, we'll get to some of your evidence here in just a second while I go on my little tangent here. But, you know, we've talked about the fact that the stuff that happens in Utah at Skinwalker Ranch is not confined to the 512 acre fence. You know, that happens all around the Uinta Basin, and for you guys to be able to be there and just take a drive out to, I know you, it's quite a what, almost 4 hour drive from Salt Lake City to over to Skinwalker Ranch, but still Years of so many places. Hey, Michelle, how you doing? Good to see you.
There she is.
What's
Indeed.
up, Michelle?
But just be able to go out and see that kind of stuff happening in the night sky, any chance you have a much higher chance, I think you do than I do here in Pennsylvania. Sort of. But again, will o' the wisp. That's very interesting, Dustin, that you mentioned that, because I said that bit about Lucy, and if you watch and I'm sure you probably watched the show.
Oh yeah.
There's been so many times where I get approached by people. Of course, I do the podcast talking about each and every episode, and people are like, "Oh, it's all crap," blah blah blah. Not everyone, but I do get a few of those. And my response to them is, obviously you don't watch the show, because if you did watch the show, really watch the show, you would be all in with what they're doing out there, because it's craziness, and these guys are not making it up. And that will o' the wisp that we call Lucy, I've seen it on screen floating around, that ball of light floating around like it was looking for something in the trees and moving around intelligently. So
Well said, Jeff.
yeah, it is. So you became an investigator, and then you moved into being how long have you been the director for the state?
Not that long. April of this year.
Oh wow, okay. All right.
So the prior state director stepped down, Brian Lindley. He was amazing. Love that dude. I begged him to stay, but he left, and I took over, and it's a lot of responsibility, but I love it so far, and things have been great. And like you said, Utah's an amazing place for UFOs, or if you're into paranormal, or if you're into cryptids. Like, we got it all here. So yeah, it's an amazing place.
Yeah, that's why I'm so pleased with Phenomicon and the job that they do. We were talking about that pre-show. Phenomicon is such a wonderful, wonderful event. And Bridget and her team do a fantastic job running that whole thing. And I've been to 3 of them. There's been 4. I've been to 3 of them, and they've just been fantastic. And I don't ever intend to not go. I want to be at all of them from here on out. I think,
Amen.
Jim, you feel the same way.
I've been to all 4, and they honestly get better just when I think they couldn't possibly be better, every year ends up being better than the previous. So I'm looking forward to number 5 for me.
Number 5, yeah. And then you get to playing the band and everything too, the Hitchhikers and all that stuff. But yeah, good stuff. Oh, that's fantastic. So being a director, I mean, let's go back to being a field investigator. Okay. So when I first met you, you were a field investigator. And so tell us a little bit about what does that entail? I mean, do you get reports that you then go out and check on or something? Was awesome checking out Utah. Beautiful. Phenomicon was awesome. See you there again, Jeff. Yes, Burton Cosgrove. I'm glad to see you here, Burton. Thank you.
Burton. He was the dude from Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I met him too. What's up, Burton?
Yeah. So how does that go? I mean, my ignorance on MUFON, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You get people's reports and you go follow up on them?
Absolutely. So MUFON, it originally started, it was originally called the Midwest UFO Network. Mm-hmm. And then it grew so big that they called it the Mutual UFO Network. And so it grew through states, and now we're worldwide. We have chapters all throughout the world. I was just in Ireland, and I met with the Ireland director. She's amazing. Her name's Linda. So how it works is, if someone has a sighting or an experience, you go to the website and you fill out a form, and it'll go to us. And so it tries to send it to whatever region it's at. So we take care of Utah. Anything in Utah, if there's a sighting here or an experience, it comes to us. And yeah, if we have to go on site, we will. But it's the only organization I know where you submit a report and a human being will actually contact you and investigate your case. So we'll go through, we try to see what it could be, right? So most cases we get are identifiable. They might be satellites. They might be airplanes, helicopters, every now and again, Venus. Venus is just so bright in the sky. It's the second brightest night object next to the moon.
Right.
And I think just because it doesn't create its own light, it's reflecting. So it kind of catches your eye in a weird way. We get that sometimes, but the cases that we can't explain, you'll stay awake at night thinking about them, and you'll think about what angles you want to take. Who else can you contact? How do we sort of get answers for these people? And it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life, talking with experiencers, talking with witnesses, and hearing their testimony. And it's just really opened up my mind to the possibilities of what this thing we call reality is, and what everyone perceives this to be, but what is always going on around us at all times. I think for the mass majority of people, I think the only sort of UFO stories they hear is the ones that are made into movies or people write books about it. But the truth is, there's reports coming in every single day. Like MUFON has over 130,000 reports in its database. And some of the cases are just as intense and interesting as some of the movies that have been made and books have been written about. And it's really just something that I love to do. I think about my life beforehand and after, and I go, I hope I never get to a point where I can no longer do this.
Right. Wow. And it has to be probably, I would think, even though it's exciting and you get to hear firsthand reports and maybe even some pictures that people would take. And we're going to get to some of, you've got some evidence to share with us tonight. We're going to get to that here in a minute, but also maybe a little disturbing. I mean, do you get cases of abduction cases and things like that too? I mean,
yep. Yeah. So we have a team inside of MUFON called the ERT team, the Experiencer Resource Team. So I'm a member of it as well. Any case that comes in that involves a close encounter, what we call a Category 3 case, or any case where someone's taken aboard a craft, come to the ERT team. So it's a completely different investigation, a completely different approach. We have to apply for that position and sort of be vetted because you are dealing with people that have been through a lot. I can tell you some of the experiences I've talked to, it's not just a one and done deal. I can tell you if you come in contact with a being, you will have paranormal experiences the rest of your life. And you may have other experiences where you encounter beings as well. And it can be very scary. It can uproot someone's lives completely. You think about everything that we're taught in school, everything our parents teach us, whatever religion you're part of, your community, and you have that one experience that may be as short as 20, 30 seconds, or it may be a couple hours. And everything you thought you knew about this world, this reality, this existence, it just crumbles around you. And now you're just sitting in your own rubble. And a lot of people have to make that decision of, who do I talk to if I want to talk to people?
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people don't.
A lot of people don't. And a lot of cases I've had where at the end of it, they'll tell me either you're the first person I've told this to, or I stopped telling people this because I was tired of them thinking I was crazy. And it's heartbreaking because when you talk to these people, down to earth, everyday people from all different walks of life, and to me, 90 something percent of them, I'd say the 97, 98% of them seem incredibly credible in everything they say.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more, Dustin. I mean, I'm always talking about that transition moment when you go from being a believer who's like, yeah, I believe these things are possible, to actually becoming an experiencer. Now, I've never seen a UFO. I've never been abducted that I know of anyway, but I have experienced those moments that you're talking about where they literally break your definition of reality. And the way you phrased it a moment ago, where you find yourself standing kind of like in your own rubble because everything that you perceived in your concept of reality, your religious upbringing, your spiritual beliefs, all of that, like in the experiences that I've had, have left me unable to reconcile what those beliefs that I was raised, that belief system, that concept, that construct of reality. And so I can't imagine what it's like for the individuals that experience things like abduction. But just having experienced my own experiences, they bring a very unique kind of trauma that for me anyway still is, I'm still trying to reconcile and make sense of it, because it's not easy to talk about, because you're always going to have people that are going to be like, oh yeah, what has this guy been drinking or smoking, and it's unfortunate, but I think that stigma is slowly starting to disappear. Maybe not as quickly as we wanted to, but I think a lot of things like these past congressional hearings have made great strides in helping us break down some of that stigma. And of course, talking about it like we do on your podcast, Jeff, another great way to make people realize that you're not alone in experiencing these strange and bizarre phenomena, and they're, you're not alone, and there's a very comforting, reassuring thing in knowing that.
Yeah, and you do too as well, because you guys we're going to talk about the hearings a little bit too as we go along tonight. Question for you there, Dustin. Can anyone access those reports, or must you be a member?
So you must be a member to access the entire database. They do have a link that I think shows you the last 20 cases that came in. But to access the database, you have to be a member. I think it's $6 or $7 a month, or you can pay for a year. I think it's 60 or $70 for the year. But yeah, it's wild. So in the database, you'll get the synopsis of whatever the witness sent in, and then any original attachments they did, any pictures, any videos. And you can really granularly search for this website: shapes of craft, dates, cities, countries, counties, colors. Like it's crazy how much you can drill down and look at certain aspects or cases that may be correlated with one another.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. And I'm not a member, and I'm not, I guess I'm a little ashamed to say that.
How dare you?
I know, right? I have been to the website and I've gone through and I've read, and that's one of the things that I have read a lot of information that's out there about their charter and everything that, not everything, but I've read a lot of information about there that a non-member can access and find out about what you guys are all about. But, in the stories that's going to be interesting. I mean, I know, right, Burton? There was another question that somebody had asked about, Burton said he joined up in Canada. He joined MUFON up there in Canada. And then I saw Kat, who is in the Nova Scotia area. And she was asking about the Maritimes. Is there a chapter in the Maritimes over there in Nova Scotia
That's a great question. I could look that up and let you guys know. So not every country will have its own investigator. We have what's called like the International Case Assisted Group. So if a region does not have a field investigator, they will take that case. But I can tell you it's starting to grow like crazy. So like I said, Ireland has its own. England, Brazil has an insane history of UFOs. And there's a guy named Tiago Luiz Teixeira, which he's the Brazilian national director, and we're actually going to have him speak virtually on December 7th, and he has a million different things about Brazil. Yeah, so there's chapters all over the world. I don't know for sure if Nova Scotia has its own group. I'd have to look that up.
There's a question from Tatiana. Can people gift a MUFON membership to others?
That's a great question. I don't know if you can or not. Man, yeah, I'll have to look into that as well.
Okay. No, when you were just talking about he's going to be on, you're going to have him on virtually. Is that things that a member can watch? I mean, is that going
to so that's just a Utah chapter meeting. It's going to be free. Anyone that's on our email list. So on social media, I just say DM me and I'll throw you on the email. We don't like to put Zoom links in social media because sometimes hackers or weird stuff will happen when they grab them.
Yep.
But we do have just an email list. If you DM me on Instagram, find my Dustin Eskelsen. If you just go to dustineskelsen.com, it'll have all my links and stuff like that. And I run the MUFON of Utah social media as well. And so, yeah, it's going to be awesome. I saw him give a presentation 2 years at the symposium. Every year, MUFON has a symposium, and it was my favorite presentation by far. And,
really?
In my head, I said, if I ever become state director, I'm getting Tiago to present for our chapter. I'm going to twist his arm and get him in a headlock and make him show us what he's up to.
Yeah, because I guess the Brazil is a hot spot as well, from what I've heard over the years. Yeah,
absolutely.
The national director for MUFON in Canada is in Nova Scotia. Oh, wow. There you go.
There we go.
Wow. Interesting. Thank you, Burton. Appreciate that. He's giving us all kinds of information over here. Yeah, because Nova Scotia also had the Shag Harbor incident that John Edwards just brought that up. The Shag Harbor UFO incident that happened. I think that was that back in the 60s, John, if I remember correctly. And we've actually had the gentleman on the show with us and talked about that. He's got a little museum down there where he covers that stuff. I think it happened in the 60s, but it went into the water right off the beach. It went down in the water, and next thing you know, there's U.S. Navy ships out there showing up and stuff. It was pretty crazy. But But yeah, that was a very interesting case.
And I'm sure the Navy just happened to be there for a different reason.
Yeah, the Navy just happened to be hanging around there. Yeah,
How convenient.
yeah, how
Yeah.
convenient that was, right? So let's jump into some of the evidence you've got. I know you have a slide press. I don't know if this is slides or, but
Yeah.
so you ready to jump into that?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I can give you guys an option, right? So
Okay.
I like to prepare. I
All
got,
right.
so I got this first case that actually came from Southern Utah. It's pretty involving. It involves two women that I believe were abducted and taken on a trip. I can go through that one. We have one that's hot off the presses from July in Beaver, Utah, where we had this object flying past this truck at an amazing speed. We actually have video of it.
Oh wow.
It's pretty awesome. And then Jim made me think, because I joined as a believer. I had never seen any UFOs or anything. But back in April, I was invited out to a property called Space Wolf Research, which is just south of Skinwalker Ranch. It shares a property line. The owner, Ryan Burns, invited me out there. And I saw my first UFO there. And we have some crazy video and also audio of what we experienced. So I'll let you guys decide. I'm open to whatever you guys want to do.
Well, let's go. You got the one queued up here. Let's
You want to do that? Okay.
Yeah, it's the Mothership case.
The Mothership one. So this one
Utah.
happened in August of 2023. It came into us about September 2023. And I can say that this is what was my most involving case. And this is the reason I joined the ERT team. So we had two women. They're from Arizona, and they were driving up for a road trip, a week-long road trip. And they were going to come up to the Pacific Northwest. They're going to go up to Washington and Oregon. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking with the driver, I said, why were you going up there? And she said, oh, we were celebrating and partaking in the celebrations of our ceremonies of our people. So I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, oh, we're Native American. The driver said, I'm Navajo. And the passenger I found out later is Apache. Really good friends to the point where they considered each other sisters. They called each other sisters. So they came up to the Pacific Northwest and then they swung back down. And on the last day, they were coming back through Utah. And they find themselves, we can go through this as well. So the Uinta Basin, I just wanted to show you sort of this area here. What's interesting is I wanted to see per capita how many cases, which counties had the most unknown cases. And I just assumed we would get the Uinta Basin, right? Mm-hmm. And when I crunched the numbers with MUFON data, I found out that the top 4 counties are all in southern Utah.
Oh, wow.
For unknown cases. And this happens to be one of them. So I just wanted to point that out. And technically, Grand County, it does have a little piece of Uinta Basin, but there's only one case I know of that actually came from that area. So they the two women find themselves in a town called Holden, southern Utah, very small town. They stop for snacks and soda. And while they're there, the passenger believes that she found a shortcut to get them home quicker. So they set off at sunset from Holden and they drive over to Aurora. And somewhere along the way, they took like a dirt trail that kind of cut off over here. So they're driving and the driver tells me out of the right side of her window, she sees an orange orb bouncing along the treetops, keeping up with the car. Now, at first, she thought, oh, this is a man-made object. She was just trying to rationalize what was going on. And I would have too. I would have been like, oh, this has to be a drone or anything like that. Mm-hmm. She tells me after a while, this thing kept up with the car and it kept getting closer to him to the point where she said, oh, this isn't man-made at all. This is something not from this planet or this existence. This orb came within several feet of the car.
Wow.
The passenger, the driver tells me that the passenger remarked that the inside of it looked like a cage, which I thought was interesting.
Really?
When I was talking with the passenger, she described something that I couldn't even wrap my head around, like what it looked like. So I said, hey, can you please draw me a picture? So that's the picture she drew there. And the passenger told me she noted it was as big as a refrigerator, silver like or aluminum in color. It had lights of red, blue, and orange, which were turning in a counterclockwise manner. She likened the visuals of the lights to that of colored oil paint swirling in water. The passenger also noticed that she saw a blue light emanating from or near a house. So the orb goes off, it comes close a couple of feet from the car, and then eventually it goes off in the distance and it disappears from where it came. They continue driving. The driver, sort of scared from it, calls her son's father and says, "Hey, we're being chased by this orange orb." I corroborated that with the father. I actually talked with him. He seemed very down to earth and said, "Yeah, she called me and she seemed very scared that an orange orb was chasing the car." They drive until they get past the town of Aurora, and then they're greeted with this, what the driver calls the diamond-shaped craft. She said they were like rhombus in shape, little wider than they are tall. And she said they had a line going from the top down to the bottom and from the side to side.
Wow.
And basically splitting this thing into 4 quadrants. And when I asked her what color was those lines down the middle, she said not so much black as there was an absence of color, which I thought was a very interesting description.
Wow. Yeah.
She said that the other parts of the orbs, those quadrants, were just super bright lights. They multiplied from 1 into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into 4, and then at most 5 of these things were tailing the car. She told me that they would continue getting close to the car and then backing away, close to the car and backing away. And then she said they kept changing their size. So I asked her, "Oh, when they get close, they appear big to you. But when they back off, they appear small." And she said, "No, you don't understand. They're literally changing their size. Anywhere from being 2 feet wide to as wide as the 2-lane road that they were on."
Wow.
The passenger once again described this amazing thing. I couldn't get my head around what it was. So I said, "Can you please just draw me a picture?" So she said that these objects emitted green, blue, yellow, and a faint orange light, so brightly lit it would hurt her eyes to look at them directly. They were believed to have 3 legs or claws at the bottom, if you've seen the picture, because at one point, one of these things they believe attached itself to the car and began tapping on the window. So as these things, they keep driving, and the driver said, "My job was just to get us home safely." They get past, they get to about the town, we think Lyman, we're not 100% sure, and these things leave. The driver drives a little bit past, and she goes, "You know what? We got to go back. We got to find a police officer. We got to talk to someone." So they turn back around. Unfortunately, these towns in southern Utah are small. They just close up shop at night. They pull into a gas station that was either closed or abandoned. The driver gets out of the car. The passenger refused to get out of the car. The driver looks around the town, doesn't see any lights, doesn't see any police station, and she goes, "Okay, we're just going to get home." She hops in the car. As soon as they start driving, they hear what they believe was like a tapping on top of the car. So they keep driving a little bit, and at one point, the passenger said that she saw a jackrabbit on the side of the road, and she said out loud, "Run, rabbit, or they'll take you too." And the only reason I say that is rabbits are really used a lot in what's called screen memories. A lot of people that have close encounters.
Really?
Yeah. So
I didn't know
screen memories are visual distortions of memories. So it's actually a phrase coined by Sigmund Freud, and it's usually used with children. So if children are going through a very traumatic moment, they'll have a memory of it as being pleasant. And a lot of times they'll visually distort that memory and put something in place that's pleasant. And a lot of times it's an animal. It may be a rabbit, so forth, clowns, things like that. So people have those same things happen to them when they have close encounters. We call them screen memories. And so the ERT team, we actually have a menu. We gotta see if they have a screen memory. And the top 4 you have are deer, clowns, rabbits, and owls. And the only reason I say jackrabbit as well is because in the same year we got a case that goes all the way back to 1978 where 2 women were driving in Cedar City, and they pulled up to what they thought was a big bunch of giant jackrabbits in the road. They got out of the car, and these jackrabbits turned around, and they turned out to be gray aliens, and they were eventually taken. That story's crazy. We can get into it another time.
Okay.
But so not too long after she said, "Run, rabbit, or they'll take you too," these diamond craft come back, and they were surrounding the car. And the passenger tells me that the car wasn't getting any traction, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And she starts yelling at the driver, "Go, go! We got to get the hell out of here! What are you doing?" And the driver says, I am. And she showed her that her foot was pressed down on the gas.
Wow.
You could hear the engine revved up, but the car was going nowhere. It was just sitting there. So almost like it was stuck in mud. So the passenger just starts praying out loud. She starts saying, "Please let us get home. We just want to get home safely with our family. Please, please, please." She just starts praying like crazy. A couple moments later, these diamond craft leave. The car begins to get traction again, and they get to go on the road again. That's when they come to this cut in the rock at Hanksville. So they pass this cut in the rock here. and they see a giant fireball hanging in the sky. Both of them described it as being like just a bunch of fire, almost like molten lava swirling around in it. The driver describes this fireball as being twice the size of a full moon. She tells me it was aware of us being there.
Wow.
She could smell it. She said it had a burning smell. I asked her, what did it smell like? She said, well, it didn't quite smell like burning plastic. It didn't smell like burning wood. It smelled like something I'd never smelled before. And this smell stayed with her for days after this event. When she was describing it to me, the driver kept referring to it as the Mothership. And I thought that was kind of, I was confused, and I asked her, why do you refer to this as the Mothership? And she told me, all the other craft are connected with it. I'm not sure why I know this, but I know all the other things we saw that night have to report to it. The passenger would draw me a similar picture and a description, only she remembers seeing objects flying into the right of it. The passenger said that it was as big as a quarter if you were to hold it out at arm's length. And to give some perspective, if you were to hold out an aspirin at arm's length, that'd be about a full moon. So this thing was giant. The interesting thing about this part of the road trip is they were very unsure about how this thing left. They don't know if it moved away, if it disappeared. They don't know how long they saw this fireball. This part of the journey was very hazy to both of them. They eventually end up in the town of Blanding around 3 a.m. and they just crash out. They said they found a parking lot that they felt safe in, and they parked the car and they just zonked out. So here's sort of the route they took with some of the objects they saw. So this whole route should have taken them about 5 hours, 5 minutes. It took them about 7.5 hours, which means we have about 2.5 hours of missing time.
Wow.
So some of the aftermath. The passenger still had issues with her eyes. She still said her eyes couldn't focus as well, and she thinks it's because of those bright lights from the Diamond Craft. She also said that her for days after she got home, her nose felt like it was bleeding, but no blood was coming out. The passenger would have drastic changes in her sleep cycles. She used to be an early to bed, early to rise person. She said she found herself staying up late at night, and she had this incredible compulsion to go outside at random hours of the night and stare in the sky. And she told me verbatim, "We are not the same. Something is missing. It wants us to go outside and look at the sky." She had difficulty dealing with these events for months after. And she brought up a very good point, a very good fact about the trip. When they stopped in the town of Holden to get snacks and soda, she said that we were hungry, we were thirsty, we wanted to eat and drink. 7.5 hours later, when they were in Blanding, she noticed that not one sip of soda had been taken, not one bite of food had been taken.
Wow.
The driver would take that same route back the opposite way with a different friend during the day. And she said that there were certain areas that were very eerie to her when she was driving by. But she said the biggest takeaway she had is that it seemed like forever to take that route back again, which made her believe that, yes, there was missing time somewhere there. Memories began flooding back to the driver. She remembers being inside one of those diamond-shaped craft, traveling at an incredible speed towards the mothership. Unlike the passenger, the driver felt very lucky to have had this experience. However, with guilt in her voice, knowing the difficulty the passenger was experiencing, she told me for weeks after returning home, I longed to be back with those diamond craft.
Really?
She also began having, the driver began having vivid dreams or possibly memories. She wrote me, "Hey, Dustin, I've been working a lot. I had a dream a few days ago where a being was trying to communicate with me. They communicate with their minds, but they can also use their voices. The being used its voice, and the being spoke to me in some sort of melodic language. I think what he was trying to ask me was, what is the purpose of human beings in the universe? I'm not sure if this was a dream or if it was from memory or not, but it was so real." Every time I talked with a passenger after this, she constantly told me she wished she'd never gone on this trip.
Wow.
She's like, I never want to go on this trip. And for months after, she had bone-chilling encounters, which it would take hours for us to go on all the certain things that she had to deal with after this. So the last question, typically the last question I always ask someone is, do you have any sort of belief or any sort of reason as to why you had this experience? Most people will tell you no. It was just the right time at the right place, or if they had a bad experience, the wrong place at the wrong time. The driver, with certainty in her voice, said, I do. So when they were coming back up from the Pacific Northwest, they dropped into Wyoming, and they went to the Bighorn Mountains, and they visited a place called the Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Now, I was unaware of medicine wheels. I didn't know much about them. I had to research them. And essentially, they are a very sacred spiritual place that Native Americans build. What they'll do is they'll take a lot of rocks and build a circle. And then in the circle, they'll do a line down the center and a line across, basically splitting it up into 4 quadrants. And these quadrants mean a lot of different things. They mean they represent the directions, northeast, southwest. They represent the seasons, fall, winter, spring, summer. They represent the physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional states of human beings, among other things. So the last thing they wanted to visit was this place. The driver did, anyways. And I have to say that this particular medicine wheel is possibly the most visited, most studied, most pristine, and one of the biggest in North America. And one of the reasons for it is, if you look at this picture here, they have these extra stones on the outside of it. Mm-hmm. If you were to draw a line between some of these stones to the other ones, these circles on the outside, they line up to very important astrological objects in the sky during important times of the year. So, for example, one of these lines line up to the sun's position during the summer solstice on sunrise, and one of them lines up to the sunset during summer solstice. There's other lines that line up to Sirius star during special times of the year. And so people are just sort of fascinated. This is almost like a calendar as well. Mm-hmm. So they drive to this place, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. You can only get to it during the summer because the roads are sort of horrible or other times of the year. So they show up here, and the driver tells me the passenger was very apprehensive the entire drive that they were going there, very nervous. She said, I've never seen her that anxious before. And as they got closer to the place, the passenger kept getting more and more anxious. So they arrived to the place, they park, and the passenger is like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm staying in the car. The driver said, that's fine. I'm going to go check this out. So the driver goes, and she takes in the beauty of it. She takes in the spirituality, the heritage behind it. And she told me that she prayed over this medicine wheel, and she prayed out loud, whatever is out there in the universe, I wish for it to show itself to me. So be careful what you wish for, folks.
Yeah, we've heard that one too many times, right? Wow, that's an amazing story,
up.
Dustin.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a question from Michelle. Dustin, what would be your number one recommendation for someone to do when they have a UAP UFO encounter besides contacting MUFON?
Yes, contact MUFON, of course. So it's funny. When I first joined MUFON, I was like, everyone report MUFON, report to MUFON, report to MUFON. And of course, selfishly, I think I would like that because the quicker you report, the more chance we can get evidence and the memory's fresh. However, as time has gone on, and also since I've witnessed stuff since I've become an investigator, every sighting and experience is so personal to each person. I tell you, do what's best for you. If you want to report it to MUFON, great. We're here for you. We'll investigate a case. If you want to, there's other reporting sites. There's Newfork, the National UFO Reporting Center. Amazing place. You want to report it there? Great. You want to talk among family and friends? You want to talk about it with your preacher, your priest, whatever religious organization you're with, family, friends. You want to keep it to yourself for a bit. You really got to do what's best for you. From a MUFON standpoint, we would like to investigate the case sooner than later, only because sometimes evidence and flight records and all these other stuff, we only have so much time that we can kind of go back and look at all that stuff. And if we need to go on site and take samples, because MUFON has its own lab, like if we need to take soil samples, water samples, swabs from skin, anything like that. And we also take electromagnetic readings, Geiger counters we have. It's best to do it as quickly as possible. But once again, if you have an experience, it's personal. And so I say you do you. You do what's best for you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. And it's interesting too. And somebody, yeah, right. Somebody had mentioned the power of intention is very powerful. And you talk about the two different, and Steven, leave that up there because we'll get to that question here next. But, you talk about the passenger and the driver having two completely different takeaways from this experience. One wants nothing to do with it, freaked her out, and it just sounds like it stays as a nightmare to her. And then the other one really wants it and wants it again and wants to revisit it and had a time or a great feeling from it all. Wow, that's and I believe it. That intention right there, I think is very interesting because some people are gonna. And we're going to talk about this later when we get into disclosure, but even though we may get full disclosure, I don't know if we'll ever get full disclosure, but let's say right now we're at that point where everybody's admitting that UFOs are real. We don't know what they are or where they're from, but they're real. You still have a large majority of people that are going, no way, I'm not buying it, don't care, don't want nothing to do with it. It ain't real. Even if it landed in front of them, they would probably find a different explanation for what it was
Yeah.
because of the mindset behind it. They don't want to know that. They don't want that. And then there's other people like me. I'm a little fearful because I don't want to have, any experiments done or anything like that. But I do want to, I would love to have the experience to a good experience for myself later on. So that was very interesting how you talked about the passenger and the driver, and they're two separate takeaways from the same thing. They both were there. They both got the same experience.
Yeah, it's sort of the duality of life, and everyone's perspective is different. And that's one of the fascinating aspects of it. And it even caused like a rift in their relationship. They didn't talk for a long time.
I bet it did. Yeah.
Well,
Steve, go ahead.
Sightings, I would say sightings where you have more than one witness, where you got somebody that can corroborate what the one person who's coming forward with the report or the experience has to say. I mean that I hate to use the term, it carries more weight, but those are the ones where you really want to pay extra attention to, at least on my side, because you have corroborating testimony from more than just one person. Because as we always tend to see in whether we're talking UFOs or Sasquatch or shadow beings, whatever the case may be, they a lot of them, they tend to be very singular events where only one person is experiencing it. But when you've got two people that experience it, that's that always makes me take a little more notice to it anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Steve asked the question, what would be your best recommendation for someone who wants to see a UFO?
Come on down to Utah.
If that happens to be my friend Steve Barnes, my fellow massive OMD fan, then Steve, come with me sometime out to the Uinta Basin, and you'll have a pretty good chance of seeing something there. But Dustin probably knows more than I do.
So Uinta Basin, and if you're looking at New Fork data and MUFON data, you want to go to southern Utah. It's on fire. Canyonlands and Moab. Those two places. If you want to see a UFO, and not only that, if you're looking at MUFON data, southern Utah has way more close encounters, missing time, abductions, people being chased in their vehicles by things.
Wow.
Southern Utah is on fire. And it's my own personal belief. This is just me talking, looking at New Fork data and MUFON. Uinta Basin is a hotspot as well. It's the only place I've seen UFOs is Uinta Basin. And it's a very well documented area, and thank God we're looking at it now from a real scientific perspective. And you have shows like Skinwalker Ranch and all them really doing that. However, I do think southern Utah gives Uinta Basin a run for its money, if not exceeds what's going on in the Uinta Basin from the data I'm looking at.
Fascinating. Wow. I did not know that. I have a lot of friends. In fact, this Steve Barnes gentleman and I have a very dear friend that lives down in the St. George area. So learning about that's really fascinating. I know that there has been some sightings along the Salt Lake Valley, like out towards Dugway. There's been some really fascinating stories that I've heard. People like Dave Rosenfeld have talked about that are really, really compelling out there by the Dugway Proving Grounds, where all kinds of strange and unusual stuff is alleged to take place there. But yeah, Utah, Utah is a hotbed for this kind of activity, and it's one of the things I enjoy about living here.
Absolutely. Shout out to Dave Rosenfeld. He's awesome. I love that dude.
Yeah.
Alien Dave.
Brandon, that one there, I think, you reported to MUFON, or what was the other one you mentioned?
New Fork. National UFO Reporting Center. So I don't believe New Fork reaches out to everyone. They may only reach out to a handful. It's really only ran by like a very small group of people. Dave Davenport runs it. and he's had it forever. And it's free. You can go there right now. You don't need to pay, and they have all their database there. You can look it up. It's awesome. And in fact, when we're investigating cases, one of the places we look for corroborating evidence or seeing if there's other witnesses that may have seen the same thing, we look at New Fork. That's one of the top places we look to see if anyone else in the area has seen the same thing that this person is reporting.
Wow. Yeah, because there you're going to go. I say that because, go to MUFON, because there you're going to you're going to be reporting it to someone or a group of someone's who want to investigate this. They really do. And it's not one of these things where, you go tell a family member, and we just kind of discussed this earlier, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds like a great experience, Jeff. Yeah, well, maybe you should see a doctor, but
Yeah.
no, that's where you go. And it's like this podcast right here. We're like-minded people. We're people who, you come here, you're going to listen to this probably because you are interested in this subject and you are a believer in this subject. So I've had experiences myself, a couple of them, UFO type experiences where I'm like 100% sure in my own mind of what I saw, and it was not a plane. It wasn't, and all that. And then you go to someone like David Russell and Chris Bledsoe, who talk about their experiences with the orbs that have manifested into other things. And again, there you go back to that whole thing of intention of thinking, praying, or intention involved in that. A good vibes, if I could use that terminology, putting out good vibes about the whole thing. But not always, as you saw with the passenger, not always are those experiences so wonderful.
No, it's a bit of a mixed bag, for sure.
Really. I want the wonderful ones. I want the really good, the rabbits, not the clowns are kind of creepy, but the rabbits, not
Maybe that's why I like bunnies so much. I mean, seriously, it's like maybe I have had an experience in my subconscious somewhere. Who knows? That blew my mind when you mentioned that about the relevance of rabbits and whatnot. So that's fascinating.
Screen memories. Owls are probably number one. There's a huge,
and I hear a lot of things about owls too. People that have had really difficult to explain experiences and strange phenomena. One thing that I've seen a lot of the reports is they mention having seen owls right before or right after or even during some of these incidents. So
absolutely,
that's fascinating.
And real quick, you were talking about Chris Bledsoe. So when I started, researching him, he actually reported his case to MUFON, so I was able to go through the case and look at it. Nice. And in one of his interviews, he talks about how one of his experiences was seeing the white lady, he calls her the white woman.
Yep.
And he believes that she's going to come back at some point, and he's going to bring people with him to witness them. And he keeps having these visions that he believes that she's going to show up again in Utah. So I actually reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, I don't mean to bother you or anything, but I'm in Utah and I would love to know more about it." And he believes that he keeps having visions of either Horseshoe Canyon, which is right outside of Hanksville, where those ladies saw that giant fireball, or Butler Wash Ruins, which is right outside of Blanding, which is where they eventually crashed after they had their experience. So Southern Utah is just a fascinating place. Even some of the terrain there looks like it's from another planet to me. It's just
really does
bizarre. Yeah.
Especially when you get to Bryce Canyon and some of the rock formations there. I mean, the hoodoos, I mean, they look otherworldly. They really do.
Yeah.
The lady in white crosses so many cultures. Yes. That's very true.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I had Chris on the show. We actually had him on and we had a conversation with him, and it's pretty wild. And I read his book and all that, and it's one of those times where you read a book like that and you're like, UFO of God. And you're like, okay, wait a second. I am a Christian, but now you're mixing two things together, UFOs, and you're mixing that with God. I don't know. But then again, you read it and then you get his understanding of why he calls it that, why the book is named that, so really, really interesting. And then David Russell, is a friend of his, and I've had David on the show as well. Matter of fact, he was on with Chris. But it's like, and Burton mentioned, it's almost like he can manifest them. and he goes into like a meditative state or a prayer state, however you want to call it that, and sure enough, they show up for him, and he videos them all the time. If you follow him on Instagram or whatever, you see his videos all the time of what he's finding. It, sometimes and I've seen, you talked earlier about a lot of times you can debunk what they've seen or you can explain it away. I mean, how many times have we seen a string of lights going across the night sky and it turns out to be Starlink, stuff like that. And that's really a strange thing to see, but yet it can be explained away. Yeah. Bledsoe is a man. Yeah. They had that Beyond Skinwalker Ranch episode where they put electrodes on his brain and he goes into the theta waves. Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
That's a killer episode.
It is.
I love that one.
Really is. Yeah, very good one.
Now here's an interesting synchronicity, Jeff.
Okay.
When you had Chris Bledsoe on that evening, I was wearing this same Duran Duran t-shirt.
Hey,
so
there are no coincidences.
There are no coincidences. Yes.
All right, so I think you've got another one queued up here. Do you want to?
Yeah, this.
All right,
we're gonna lighten the mood a little bit. That other one's a pretty heavy case.
That is very heavy. Yeah, it made me think of the I had their names right. The paranormal guys from the Utah or the Ute tribe.
Paranormal Rangers. John
Paranormal Rangers.
John and Stan. Yeah.
Stan, yeah.
Stan, yeah. I had them on the podcast as well, and man, their story is.
Yeah, those guys are awesome.
Yeah.
That gets into some really scary stuff. But all right.
So
the saucer.
So this one, I'm gonna rip through two. This one's really a quick one, actually. Okay. And let's get my notes on this one. So this one is a little older, I guess, 2019. We have a pilot that actually reported this, and pilots, we don't get a lot from pilots, but when we do, we take them very credible. And we tried to keep them anonymous as possible because I know personally at the last MUFON symposium, I was in an elevator and I just said, "Hey, you were here for the MUFON convention?" He goes, "No, actually, I'm a pilot, just flying out of here." And he said, "Hey, can I show you something?" And this is not this case, but something else. And he showed me a video of these crazy lights that he filmed from him flying. And he told me what aircraft what air place he works for. And then I said, selfishly, I gave him my card and said, "Please report this." And he looked at me dead in the eyes, dead serious. And he wasn't joking around. He said, "If I report this, it's going to be anonymous, correct?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. No worries." And he said, "Okay." And unfortunately, he never reached out to me, but it kills me that we get so many pilots that see things that can't talk about them because they're considered crazy.
Hopefully that will change soon.
They can lose their flight status, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And that's what the word is. That's how they put food on the table.
The stigma is real.
The stigma is real. So this one, this comes from Kane County. So this is one of the southernmost counties in Utah. Once again, southern Utah. It's on the border. And this is just an interesting one. You see this saucer-like cigar object.
marching.
So
this is amazing video. Wow.
Yeah, this is a gem here.
Yeah, there's no wings, no tail, no
anything. In fact, the pilot said they're flying around 40,000 feet and at 480 nautical miles per hour. He did not observe any wings, engines, or rudders on it. So
yeah, and there's no, and I was watching behind it because if you're in a plane, a lot of times you can see the visual distortion that the engine exhaust puts out behind it. You can see how it distorts the ground or whatever's behind it. It shimmers a little bit. None of that is happening here. Nothing.
Right. Yeah. So this one's just kind of a fun, quick one that people look at, and I always love this one.
Yeah, Barbara Mora is asking the question,
Sure.
what was that filmed on, a cell phone or something else?
It was, yeah, and I don't remember the type of cell phone, but it was filmed on the pilot had a cell phone out and he was filming it.
Wow, that's really, really good. And you can tell, sometimes you see, from an airplane, they say you see lights on the ground or something like that, and you're thinking, okay, maybe it truly is lights on the ground, and you're just seeing it, weird because it's. But that's not. I mean, that's following them. That's pacing along with the plane at the same speed. That's not, and it's not a reflection. This is good. That was really, really good. Oh my
Yeah, that's a
god.
good one. In fact, I was just looking at Pennsylvania cases, Jeff. I was thinking about putting one on. I didn't have time to put together, but there was one in September 21st where someone saw a similar type object, and I was looking at the video, and it's pretty awesome. They were on.
I got to hook up with the director here. I have to do this.
Absolutely.
I'm going to sign up tomorrow. I'm going to do it. I swear.
We welcome you.
All right, good deal.
Yeah, if you want. So this case, I love this case. This is amazing. So it was investigated by Ben Stoll. He's the assistant state director, and I don't know if you guys met him. He was at the symposium. He's an amazing dude, and he actually lives in the base.
Ben was at Phenomicon. I believe he had
he's in the chat too.
Worked in the mining fields. Yeah, Ben was really cool. I got to meet him.
There he is.
Really pleasure to meet him.
Oh yeah, right there. Chris Blow, so's the man. He actually has a hat that says "I've been Bledsoed." Yeah, Ben's the best. I honestly, I don't know. I could take on the workload without him. And he's in his investigation. He's an amazing investigator. He doesn't leave any stone unturned. Sometimes I have to tell him, like, hey, maybe chill a little bit. Like, you're going to burn yourself out, because he's calling all sorts of people and he's investigating. And he really gets down to the bottom of things. And so I love him. He's a great addition to the team. And so this case came in from July 18th in Beaver, Utah, which is in southern Utah again. And so when we get a case, we get the synopsis that the person wrote, and there's all this data they fill out, and then any attachments. So with this case was 4 screenshots, not video, screenshots of the dash cam. And just by looking at them, before I assigned the case to him, I said, hey, listen, this may be a bug or a bird, but see if you can get the video from the people, because it seems like a cool case. Basically what happens is the husband is driving, the wife was a passenger, and while they were driving, the wife saw this black object zoom past the car, like this big object. It was silent, and it freaked her out. It was moving so quickly. In fact, she whipped her head around and saw it for another split second. It was gone. She was so freaked out that she decided to submit the case. So what's cool about this is this dash cam was a really good dash cam. So we have the time and date stamp in the left-hand corner, but we also have the actual GPS coordinates, how fast the car was going. And this particular dash cam can record up to 4K. They, however, are recording in 2K at 60 frames per second, which is key for this case, because most dash cams only do 30 frames per second. So we were able to get twice as much data on this thing.
Wow.
So this is exactly where they're at going northbound, kind of outside the township of Manderfield. So the husband didn't even notice this thing. It was moving so fast. So I'm going to play this at regular speed and let me know if you guys catch it, because this is interesting. So,
wow, I did not.
You didn't? Did you get it at all, Jim?
I think I saw a bit of it.
Yeah. We played this at a local chapter meeting, and only 2 people raised their hands. So I'm going to slow down. This is 1/10 the speed.
Oh, that was it right there. I saw it.
Yeah.
Yep.
There it was.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So we have 10 frames of this thing. That's it. 10 frames we can go for. 1/6 of a second we have this thing. So on frame 1, you can't even see it from the distance. So you have to zoom in. So if we zoom in, you see that little black dot that's sort of in the clouds. Now, we go to frame 2. Frame 3, we see it move a little bit. Frame 4. Now in frame 5, you'll notice you have 2 objects there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to put a pin in this right now, because this is a very interesting part of the video. I promise I'll come back to this one. Frame 6. Frame 7 is the first time we can actually see it from the full view on the dash cam. If we zoom in, it's starting to take shape. It almost looks like a sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Frame 8.
Yep.
So frame 8, we have a sphere, and if you notice, there's almost like a box around it
Box around it. I've heard that story
Yep.
before too.
Yep.
with some sort of
Just-
energy field or something that's distorting the view.
Yep.
Something
Just
like
like Ryan Graves. Yep.
100%.
Yep, there you go. Ryan Graves. That's who I was thinking of.
Frame 9 kind of takes shape. It almost looks like an arrowheadish thing. It's almost
Yeah,
like
it
it's
does.
changing shape.
Mhm.
And frame 10, this is the last frame we see it in. Okay. So what's interesting is when Ben got the video, and this is frame 11, by then it's past the vehicle. So when Ben got the video, he was looking at the timestamp, and like you guys, he played it, and he was like, "I don't see it. What? This is crazy." So when he sent it to me, he had to put it into video editing software and go frame by frame, and I had to as well to see it. So when I was looking at this case, I was like, "Man, that thing was fast. It was literally cruising." So I was like, "Is there any way we can figure out how fast this is?" Now, once again, we only have one camera angle, so getting distance can be very difficult. It's almost like if you cover one eye, you lose your depth perception. But humor me for a sec. In frame 8, you see that little dot up in the left. It appears to me that it's in between the trailer in front of it, but behind the diesel that's up there. I could be wrong, but let's just say for the sake of it is. So we have it for 3 frames from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, and 10 to 11. And by the 11th frame, this thing's behind the car. It's gone. So I'm being generous by giving it 3 frames. But in my head, I was like, there's got to be a way to figure out distance, how far this might be. So I start looking at the fence lines, and I go, well, maybe the fence lines can give me some. And I go, no, you could put up a fence however you want. So I start looking, and I go, are the lines on the road regulated? And I start Googling it, and I find out they are. Those white dashes on the road are regulated to 10 feet in length, and the distance between each of them is 30 feet. So each line and distance, we have 40 feet. So in the video, I count probably 6 of these. So 240 feet from the truck and the object ahead of us. Now, I don't mean to turn this into a math problem, and people are dropping from YouTube already.
You didn't tell me.
There'd be math.
That's the only way I can sucker people into my my nerdy math stuff. So I believe we have about 240 feet, and I'm being generous because I'm giving it 3 frames, and by the 3rd frame, it's behind us. So we're talking about 1/20th of a second here.
Wow.
So we also know how fast the car's traveling. So I had to subtract that from the distance because it's going the opposite direction. So in that short amount of time, the car traveled rounded up around 6 feet. So if you do the calculations, you have about 4,680 feet per second that this thing is possibly moving.
Wow.
So once again, let's do our algebra here. We're going to break it down to miles per hour. Hang with me, class. If you do all the math, I believe this thing was traveling at least 3,190 miles per hour.
Wow.
So originally when I told Ben, the case came in with those 4 screenshots, and I said, hey, Ben, this might be a bug or a bird, but get the video. After seeing the video, I told him, crunching these numbers, I said, there's no way that's a bug. It's just moving too fast. It's too big. And then I told him, however, I do believe this could still be a bird if that bird had a rocket up its ass.
Yeah.
Because this thing,
exactly,
it's just zooming.
Wow.
So this is a case that, Ben and I were on the phone talking about it. We're very excited about it. We're just like, can you believe this? And this is just one of those cases that you just like, I can't believe we got a hold of this one. So here's a little zoom of the frame 8, 9, and 10. We did submit this case to the photo analysis team inside MUFON. So they're a special group of team that analyzes photos and videos, and they try to analyze if they've been altered or if they're real or they could be something. And what's interesting is one of the photo analysis team members made an interesting point that he said in that frame 10, it oddly reminds him of the shape of the gimbal.
That's
video.
what I was thinking too. The same thing, the gimbal.
Yeah, it just has that same sort of like shape. It's pretty crazy.
So let me not at all being a math kind of guy. I mean, I'm a Raiders fan after all, so numbers kind of elude me just the way that words do. But is it possible that a lot of the times why we may not see these things is because if we're relatively stationary on the ground and these things are moving at these incredible speeds, we very likely may have these things around us more often than we realize, but we just don't notice it because we don't always have, like, maybe we blink at the wrong time or something like that. Is that?
And that's all it would take is a
Yeah,
blink.
Yeah.
no, and it's funny you bring that up, Jim, because there's another case out of it's somewhere in Utah, I forget, where a guy's at a family reunion, and him and his buddy go to hit balls at the sort of like range. It wasn't even a range; it was just this big field, and there was houses in the background. I hope they didn't hit any houses with their golf balls, but they're filming from behind, and they film it in super slow mode on their iPhone, and so I think it was like 240 frames per second. And they didn't notice it till after. We have this object in the background going across the side, and they didn't notice it in the moment, didn't hear anything, didn't notice it until they played it back, and you see this orb-like object just flying, and
Right.
and only because we had that slow motion video, we were able to capture it. So
Yeah, because we see stuff like that on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, like Jeff, for instance, when they were riding in Cameron's helicopter and they kept on getting the radar telling them that the ground was only 40 feet away when in fact they were several hundred, if not 1,000 feet in the air. And then they see on the high speed camera afterward that there was some kind of object that was flying in very
Under it.
close proximity that likely was
Yeah.
triggering the radar. So I again, it just makes me wonder, with a lot of the things that we've seen documented at Skinwalker Ranch, where these things may very well be all around us, but for whatever reason, the way that we as human beings perceive light and the way our vision works, we can't see them. So therefore, and I hate to use the term invisible, but that's the way. Maybe these things just move so fast that, again, unless we are in the right kind of conditions, the right kind of background against where these things are appearing, that they may be far more common than any of us realize. Is kind of
Common.
where my thought process is going. So
no, absolutely common, and not only that, like in both this case and that golf one, no sound whatsoever. Like you ask them, did you hear
Right.
anything? They're like, absolutely no sound at all. So if these things are zooming
Right.
around without breaking wind and us hearing them zoom by, like someone throwing a football next to us, and you hear that, but with these things, they're completely silent. And in fact,
there's no sonic boom, right?
Yeah,
There
no
should be.
sonic boom. That's what was asked in the chat, and I think that's because of that box that we see around it, and they're not in. They're staying. If you, I always go back to the warp field bubble, the warp bubble. Because that's the only way you could really describe it. They're inside. They're not in our normal space because they're in that bubble, and that way they can go into water. That way they can travel through other solid rock, maybe in the mesa, and be able to travel through that stuff. I was going to bring up too, speaking of Skinwalker Ranch, and I've told the story before, but I was watching I'm a insider, so I had the opportunity to watch the cameras. And it was actually during filming 2 years ago, not this last filming season, but the one before that I was watching, and I actually saw something flash by so daggone fast. I'm amazed that I even saw it. Everybody else had the same thing. I can't believe you even saw that. And it was a silver sphere. And in this case, this thing is almost black. But it flew by. I mean, it was just a flash. All I saw was a flash. And I went back and I went, well, what was that? And so I backed it up, and I ended up taking in slow-mo and I put it into my own software and slowed it down. And I had about, I think, three or four frames of it as it passed by, and it was silver, like a silver orb. And then of course Eric Bard was asking, when did you see that? And it was while they were filming. And they looked at it in a bunch of different ways. Since that time, I have seen similar, and it goes with what Jim was just saying. I've seen similar while driving, but and it's almost like, well, now that I know what to look for, even though I missed this completely when you were showing the video, but now I've seen that before, zip, go by, and I thought, oh, was that just one of those little silver orbs flying by so fast that if you blink, you would have missed it? And that, I think that
Right.
is the case why we don't see most of these, because they're traveling so daggone fast.
So fast.
Right.
Yeah. Just like sorry, go
No,
ahead.
and maybe that's why these fighter pilots like Ryan Graves are seeing them, is because they themselves are traveling at, several hundred miles per hour, or, maybe it's just easier to I guess capture an image of these things if you're also traveling at, some certain speed. Like maybe the faster you go, the easier it is to see these things, if that makes any sense at all.
It does,
And if
actually.
not, so
Yeah,
There's
no,
a
and I think you kind of have to train yourself to look at these things. And
yeah,
even in the like
right.
paranormal world, people say, "Oh, I saw like a shadow person out of the corner of my eye," and things like that. I think a lot of stuff's going on around us that we may see out of the corner of our eye, and we
Mhm.
just write it off as, "Oh, that was nothing."
Right.
Precisely. Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
know that all too well.
Yeah.
yeah.
Ben just
So
had a nice. Go ahead, please go.
oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I told you guys I'd come back to this frame 4 because this is interesting from this case right here. So I tried to center that dot right before we see the two objects. So I literally just had the frame and centered that dot. So here we have frame 4 that zoomed in. Frame 5, we see those two objects there. It almost looks like possibly 3. You have the one on the left with something in the middle,
Mhm.
and then frame 6, frame 7, and then by frame 8, that original dot's gone. So when we think about it, what could that be? Why does it just disappear out of nowhere? So one theory is it could be a refresh issue. So whenever a frame gets reloaded, sometimes you have a certain pixels that stay there,
Mhm.
and then the next frame goes on and the things around it. However, and it could be like a hardware issue, a software issue. However, this one I've seen refresh issues before, and it doesn't quite seem like that. They're usually a little blockier, and they're not going to stay there, especially if the car's moving. There's going to be some sort of movement, and this thing does not move in those frames. So the second theory is, was there two objects there? We have this that we only see for a couple seconds. And then the theory that I think is going on here is that original dot right there from frame 4 is the port or the portal that this thing flew out of. And that original dot just disappears after 4 frames.
That's very good. That's very good analogy. I mean, I think you might be right. I think you might be correct on that. That's why the one doesn't move at all.
Yeah, it just sits there. It just sits there and then by frame 8, it's just gone. And then we just have that one object that flew past the woman, and she said it was going so fast it just freaked her out.
Wow.
Fascinating. Wow.
It is. This is really, really cool. Yeah, and it reminds me of exactly, well, other than being dark, where I saw silverish, it's very similar to what I saw, and it was moving very, very quickly. Well, somebody was asking if you could play it again in real time,
Oh,
so they could try to see if they could see it again.
yeah.
And now that they know what to look for, now you're looking right above the trailer, right?
Yep. Yeah,
That's
right
what
above the trailer,
yeah,
going
right above
towards
the
the
trailer.
driver's side.
Yeah, going
So I'm gonna
towards the driver's side of the vehicle that's the camera's in. So go ahead. Wow.
Yep.
There it is right there. I just saw it. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I only saw I only saw the one, probably frame 8 or 7, but the
Yeah.
one that was the biggest one right there, I saw it. That's crazy.
So
Wow.
everyone get this same dash cam, please, for the love of God.
What kind was it?
It looks
I
like
have
it's called
the Rove. I see it. Yeah,
Rove
Rove
R2
R2. I
4K.
have one 4K. And mine is 4K, I think.
Nice.
Look, I've got the cam that goes. There's one that goes in the back window and one in the front, and I don't ever use the one in the back. It's just the one in the front. But I'm gonna have to sit back and just review that thing, because you never know what I may have captured in all my driving around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't dare use one, because my driving habits and the way, I mean, I'm a New York driver. You'd have to censor it with language, if nothing else. So
Well, you can turn off the sound so you don't hear the road. Mine
Yeah.
has the sound turned off, because you would hear me saying stupid things in the car, or singing or something, singing along to Queensryche or something. If you follow the theory that they fly due to some kind of anti-gravity device, because the G forces would would kill you, the anti-gravity would stop the sonic boom because you're not displacing air. There
Yep.
you go. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
Amen.
it'd have to be some kind of inertia canceling.
Mhm.
You would think if there's such a technology
Inertia
that would
canceling.
cancel the forces of inertia. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, would have
Yeah.
to, or you'd splat. When you affect gravity, you affect time. Stronger gravity slows time down. If you're on the ground filming a UAP, you're not in the same time frequency, so the photo is usually blurry. Interesting, Ben. Wow.
I told you
He's
he's
been
a
at
good
this a while,
investigator.
hasn't he?
That's my man.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to have both of you guys on at some point.
Please do. Yeah. Ben,
Yeah,
Ben, he lives in the Uinta Basin. I guess I shouldn't say the actual city. I don't know if he wants it known, but he
yeah,
sees
no.
a lot of stuff. He's seen a lot of stuff there just
Wow,
living there. Like, yeah, just
wow,
hanging out and staring in the backyard. So
wow. That's crazy. I have to ask, yeah, this it's time for this. We're getting about an hour and 20 minutes here, and so let's ask the question. I could sit here and look at your evidence all day long because this is so fascinating to me. But I have to ask the question: do you think we've seen a couple hearings now? We've had the report that came out in June a couple of years ago. Um, do you think we're ever going to get disclosure, Dustin,
so
from the government?
it's tough. So this hearing, I love that we have whistleblowers coming out,
Hmm.
Lou Elizondo and Schellenberger, and all. It's amazing. Like, it's great that we have these very credible people. You do get a little tired of them getting answer questions and them saying, "Hey, I can't tell it publicly, but I can tell you in a skiff."
Yeah.
So if there is another hearing, here's what I want: as many whistleblowers can come out as possible. Let Congress hear them. But the next hearing, I want to hear from the people that do not want to speak. And Congress has the ability to subpoena people, take
Ah,
them in the skiff, get the names and the organization they work for, subpoena them. Legally, they have to come and testify. Bring these people out of the dark. If they want to be of God and country and fall
yep.
on that sword, let them. Let them sit in front of Congress. And if they say something completely different than what the whistleblowers are saying, then we have a problem on our hands because
Yes, we
someone is
do.
lying to Congress,
Right.
and that you can be convicted of that. And so I don't want to
The
see. I'm okay with listening to whistleblowers, but the next hearing, I don't want to see any whistleblowers in front of Congress. I want to see the people subpoenaed that do not want to be there.
Interesting.
I agree with that. I'm going to play devil's advocate on one aspect of that because
Okay.
I too would love to see Congress use their subpoena power for so-called hostile witnesses. And just to throw it, for instance, in there, somebody like Sean Kirkpatrick. Okay, all that somebody like him has to do, if you subpoena him or you subpoena Susan Goff, any of those people that we feel are probably gatekeepers from the standpoint of intimidating witnesses. I mean, now, forgive me, you can't tell me that watching Susan Goff sitting off to the side of John Kozlowski in this Senate hearing wasn't a little bit of the, intentional to, maybe intimidate some people from coming forward. Just, just my own personal viewpoint on that. But all these people would have to do if you were to subpoena somebody like a Susan Goff or anybody else for that matter, who we would like to think has actual inside information, all they got to do is invoke their Fifth Amendment privilege. And now, is that going to reflect poorly on them? You bet it will. But at the same time, just being able to subpoena them doesn't necessarily mean it's going to compel them to quote unquote spill the beans. So but again, I would like to see Congress do it just to do it, just for Congress to show, yeah, we're really serious, and to show you how serious we are, we're going to subpoena person A, B, C, and D. Because I think eventually it may have to come to that, but I also think we're going to continue to see what some people are calling catastrophic disclosure from people that say it's not happening fast enough, which comes along with its own set of, it's fraught with all kinds of
Yep.
difficulty if you do it that way, because there's a reason why there's a process that's involved internally for people like a Lou Elizondo, a David Grush, or anybody else that was involved in these programs that wants to come forward and tell their story. And the easiest way to do it is just to get Congress to pass these greater protections for whistleblowers and give them greater protection so that they can't have retribution taken against them by this administrative terrorism, as David Grush called it. But yeah, but I also think that disclosures, like they say, it's more of a marathon. It's not an actual event per se. It's going to happen gradually, and just look at what we've seen and heard in the last little while alone. I mean, it's extraordinary, the allegations that are coming out now, stuff that even 6 7 years ago I myself wouldn't have lent any kind of credibility to, and now I'm like, wow, okay, maybe I really do need to rethink humanity's place in the universe, and another one, setting up another one of those reality breaking moments that we talked about earlier, Dustin. So yeah,
No,
I'll shut up now.
no, you made some great points,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. And I think, being from the UFO community, of course, you want like open transparency. You want all this data and stuff like that. And so sometimes I watch that hearing and I was just like, oh man, it's kind of more of the same. I'm glad that these whistleblowers are coming out. But the truth of the matter is, if someone's on the fence or they don't know much about UFOs, and all of a sudden on the news they're having a congressional hearing about UFOs, it may make them go, oh, let me look into this. And I can tell you personally, we just got a MUFON report the other day, a close encounter from someone who said, you know what, I was watching those hearings and I usually keep this to myself because it freaks out my wife when I talk to her about it. But I want to tell someone about this because those hearings sort of inspired me to tell my story.
Yep.
So I think it's bit by bit, more and more people are opening their minds to realizing that something's going on around them. And the fact that Congress is taking it seriously, or at least showing that on camera they're taking it seriously, is enough that enough people are going to start looking into this more seriously and not just shrugging it off and saying, oh, these people are crazy.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to point out, I asked Linda to put Michelle's message back up there. Just because people haven't been in a public hearing doesn't mean they haven't briefed or given information to congressional members and staff. Amen. That's true. So, I mean, that takes you to a whole different place. And I wanted to, this whole thing with disclosure. And I know there's going to be an area where, when I mentioned this early on in the beginning of the podcast, saying, talking about full disclosure, I don't think we'll ever get full disclosure. Like, will they go back and say, yeah, Roswell happened. Yeah, we got a down craft. We took it back and took it to Wright-Patterson and we took it apart and reverse engineered it. Will we get all of that stuff? Probably not. But I think that, if we can get some of the truth out, that would be a good place to start. I was looking on here, and now, of course, I'm going to have to look it back up. I was looking on X, and I was following Ross. I do watch. I love their podcast that Ross Coulthart and
it's great.
They have, and
Roscoe.
Roscoe.
Yeah, and it was here it is here. And this just came up. This was now it's one day ago. Earlier it was 17 hours. But Senator Gillibrand reveals that AARO has spoken with 2 whistleblowers with firsthand information. And then it says here it's going to happen. I think the fact that he's already talked to the whistleblowers with firsthand information, those are whistleblowers who would not come in before. It just gives us another lens of information. They're talking about other whistleblowers that were part of the government agencies that are starting to come out and talk about stuff. I think this is needed. And somebody asked the question in there. I think it was Brendan asked the question, or why does Congress have to be involved? Congress, I think, needs to be involved because they are supposed to know about this kind of stuff. And they can also, we could do things like subpoena, or they can also try to push for whistleblowers to not get in trouble for coming out and talking about this sort of thing. Do you have another aspect about why does Congress have to be involved? I mean, more than what I could come up with.
So Nancy Mace at the very beginning, in the first 5 minutes, she brought up that the Pentagon has failed 6 straight audits. And just the other day, they said they failed their 7th audit. So last year, I was looking into that. And the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, couldn't account for 63% of $3.8 trillion.
Yeah.
So if you're Congress and you're signing these bills paying them,
Mhm.
they have to have some sort of insight and accountability for what they're doing. They can't just throw this money away. And the article went on to say that the Navy had a warehouse that they forgot about that had $126 million worth of air parts in it, like jet fighter parts in it. And it was over a decade there. So by the time they found these parts and found out that
They're
they had this
obsolete.
warehouse they didn't know about, they could only salvage like $20 million of those parts.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much money they're just throwing into this. And if you were to hide something, if you had any sort of black ops and you were trying to hide crashed UFOs, biologics, the best place to do it would be the Pentagon, because it's a complete mess. Like, no one can figure out who has what, where the money's at. They can't tell you how much of their contractors. They can't even tell you what Boeing has of theirs, and vice versa. Like, they can't account
Right.
for any of that. And so they said by 2028 they hope to pass an audit. It's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Trillions of dollars they can't account for.
Pass an audit. Yeah. You know, and I'm not going to
Well-
get into politics, folks. This is not a place for politics. I don't get into any of that kind of stuff. I don't talk about it publicly at all. But with that said, this Doge, new department, the Department of Government
Efficiency.
Efficiency, thank you, I think is needed. It's something that's been needed for a long, long time, and Godspeed to them. Go ahead. Sorry, Jim.
Well, I would add an amen to everything Dustin just said, but also there's other reasons why you want Congress involved in this. For people like us that take an active interest in following this topic, we stay fairly well updated on the information that comes out. The vast majority of people in the United States, if not the rest of the world, I would wager to say, probably still have no idea half of these remarkable things that have come out just in the last 2 weeks, if not the last couple of years. So you need to have that mainstream acceptance, that mainstream coverage, if you will, that comes from both the legacy media as well as alternative media and also Congress, because if some of these stories that we've heard all throughout the years of these programs operating above the oversight of Congress. And let's remember, hopefully most of us here paid attention in our high school and junior high classes learning about how our government operates. The president is not the dictator of our country, even though some of us may paint whoever happens to be occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Does not matter, because ultimately it's the Congress that controls how laws, they are the lawmakers, they're the legislative branch. So they also have to, particularly with the House of Representatives, they control the money, they control where the money goes. So if you are spending, as Dustin referenced, in the Pentagon's case, we're talking trillions of dollars that are unaccounted for, or even hundreds of billions of dollars that the taxpayer has a right to know where their money is going. These programs are operating above the Constitution, what the Constitution outlines, the way government is supposed to operate. Then somebody or somebodies need to be held accountable for that, because it is illegal. And particularly in these stories where we're hearing where people have been, their careers have been ruined, and in the worst of cases, people have been assassinated, have been executed by these alleged, inside operators of government operating within inside our own government. Now, I'm not at all a conspiracy theorist. I don't adhere to most of the nonsense that we hear out there, but when you start seeing information that begins indicating that there is in fact certain things that happen above the oversight of Congress, then we should all take an active interest in it, regardless of where you reside on the political spectrum, because it's your country. And if you don't start paying an active attention to these things, then that's how these things happen. That's how they get away with it for so long. So it is something that we should pay attention to, and it is something that, whether we want it to or not, regardless of how ineffective you feel Congress may be, And I happen to fall in that camp that I think one of the most inefficient things in the world is government, particularly the United States government. Then we should want Congress to pay attention, because we've seen nothing but bipartisan support for this. I mean, it's bipartisan, bicameral. I mean, this is like the one thing, because it has such wide sweeping ramifications if this truth starts to come out. Because think about this, folks. Uh, Congress does not control our perception of reality. And if reality is different, if what we've been taught to believe reality really is, what our actual place is in the universe, if not on our own planet as humanity, we have a right to know that, or at least you would think that we do. I mean, I think that we do. And so if we have people in Congress that want to move that needle forward and help us figure out this mystery and answer once and for all this age-old mystery, are we truly alone in the universe? Are we alone on this planet? Then why would we not want Congress to take an active role and getting to the bottom of this? And I it's going to be an imperfect process. It's going to be a very slow process, because that's just the way legislation works. But I'm hopeful that, as you said, Dustin, it's been a good response thus far. There seems to be genuine interest on both sides of the political aisle, and in both houses of government, both the House and the Senate. And I'm optimistic that we will eventually at least have answers to some of the questions, maybe not all of them.
Right.
And I think that's because just the very nature of the topic is so complex and multifaceted. But that's just me. That's my typical verbose way of answering a simple question. So I
No,
apologize.
No.
I'll step down from my soapbox now. Shut up.
No, well said, Jim. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Because yeah, that's, and you know what they're doing. They're and I like the approach, kind of like they're approaching it. Well, it covered a couple of different ways, but one is it's a threat to the skies. It's a threat to airplanes. It's a threat to airlines. It's a threat. So, you know, have we had midair collisions? Well, maybe, but I mean, so I like the approach, looking at it that way. It's a threat to national security. It's a threat to aircraft up in the sky and things like that. So I like that approach of looking at it and trying to get more out about it. So I don't know. What
Yeah.
do you think, Dustin? I mean, you've been at this a while.
Yeah, no, whatever reason they had to take, whether it's, yeah, we need our air safe because they are just flying without caring, right? Like if you were to just pop in an airplane and fly over certain areas,
Yep.
you would probably have fighter jets flying right behind you, telling you to turn around and land it. So it is, and Ryan Graves even talked about how that fighter jet came within several feet of him. He flew
Yep.
right past it, and he came back, and he was
Yeah.
just sort of shook up, like, "Holy, this could kill us if we run into
Yeah.
this." And it's a physical
Absolutely.
object that's flying in this, just floating in the sky.
Yep.
It could take one of our wings off, and next thing you know, we're toast, we're dead. And
Yep.
so, yeah, it's a very serious thing. And if these things happen to be malicious or have ill intent, and they have this kind of technology, they could easily take us out. So it's, from a defense standpoint, yeah, it's a worry that the military has and should continue to have, and we need to think about that as well, because even though they haven't really decided to attack us yet, yeah, it could be that they will. I don't know.
Yeah, we just don't know for sure. I did, while we're talking about the government and all of that, I did want to give a shout out also to a gentleman I had the wonderful opportunity to meet and talk to at Phenomicon, and this was Jay Stratton. And Jay and I got to hear his presentation that he gave at Phenomicon this year, which was the best one in the whole group. I think I was amazed at what he talked about and all of that. And unfortunately, yeah, well, it was, you know, it was some people did some stuff and tried to record it and all of that. But with all that said, I think it was a fantastic presentation. And I got over on the Skinwalker Ranch Insiders. I saw this today. Last month, Jay Stratton and the UAP task force was given the national. I'm going to screw this up. This word is so tough.
Meritorious.
Meritorious. Thank you. Yeah, given
Thank
the
you,
National
Jim.
Intelligence Meritorious Unit citation awarded by DNI Avril Haines directly. I've been working on this story for a couple of weeks. This was by John Greenwald Jr. who put that out. So, congratulations to Jay Stratton and the UAP task force for this citation they got. Well deserved. And I'm so happy that, like I said, if any of you were there at Phenomicon and got to hear Jay's presentation, you were probably as impressed as I was and left that hall going, oh my gosh.
It's one of the best presentations I've seen in my 4 years attending Phenomicon, and it was there's a lot of voices that are out there in trying to move the needle forward with this topic, but Jay is somebody that we should really be paying attention to. He's one of I think he is the most credible resource that we as regular citizens have. So whenever Jay speaks, Jay doesn't speak much, but when he does, you better listen to what he says, because what he's telling you is very valuable information. And that was a truly rare opportunity to hear directly from Jay what his experiences were. So I could not agree more. And I absolutely applaud Jay receiving recognition like that, because Jay's just an awesome person all around.
Yep, I agree.
And I think
And
maybe
Michelle's not too bad either. In fact, she's just as awesome as Jay.
Yeah. She keeps them together, is what she keeps them grounded. Anyway,
That's
what were
right.
you going to say, Dustin?
Oh, I was just saying, and maybe I'm giving credit where maybe credit isn't due, but I believe that the Skinwalker Ranch show and Travis and all them pulling him to Phenomicon brought him out of his shell,
I think
because he's
so.
a very shy military guy. And the fact that he's now taking the stage and talking in front of an audience, which I'm sure he was not comfortable doing, and probably shaking and whatnot. So it's cool to see that these people have so much knowledge and inside information are now talking about it, and they're willing to get on stage and tell people about this. And I think that's a really tough thing to do. Public speaking is terrifying to most people. And I just looking at Jay, I remember they brought him up for a panel 2 Phenomicons ago, and I think he said maybe 3 words.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So I'm glad to see him coming out of a shell, and he deserves to speak, and give him the mic all day long.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to have dinner with him sometime and just let him go and listen. I would just be like a little kid in the corner, just going to listen. Yeah, that's
and he's a great guitar player as well.
There you go.
I can personally vouch for that.
Yeah,
Renaissance man.
My video of all you guys up there jamming away. I got. I was honored to be able to fill. They came and asked me because the event. Film crew weren't going to film it, so they came and asked me, Jeff, would you film this? And I'm like, I got a gimbal, I got my cell phone. Okay, let's do this. So I went live and filmed the whole thing, and it was an honor for me to do that. It really was cool. All right. I have to ask you this one last question and get away from the government stuff and all that for a minute. And going by, this goes back to the UAPs that we've seen, like the one you just showed us on the video going by the car. Why are they so damn small? What do you think these are probes? Do you think these are it's small because if there is non-human intelligence aboard, that they're not the same stature of human beings, which is very likely? Why do you think they're so small?
So they may be like we were talking about before, trying to be clandestine. So the smaller it is, probably the less you're going to notice it.
Yep.
However, what's interesting is sometimes you'll hear stories of people being taken aboard a craft, and they may give you definitive dimensions of it. They may be like, oh, it was like 20 feet wide.
Yeah.
And then once they're inside, it's like they're inside a giant airline hangar. And so I think our perception of, well, what can fit inside of there may not be that at all. That little ball that flew by that truck might be as big as a house when you get inside of it somehow. Somehow these technologies, they don't jive with our perception and reality of space and time and physical things. So I think they're as small as they need to be and as big as they want them to be on the inside. That's just sort of how intelligent they are.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, to tell you, I don't know,
Yeah,
but
we
it's
don't know,
fascinating
right?
to hear so many stories about all these things come in so many these shapes and sizes and triangles and saucers and orbs and
Mhm.
jellyfish. Even that Immaculate
All that.
Constellation talked about another jellyfish sighting on the Mexico-American border. They described it as like a brain with tentacles hanging off of it.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff
It's
right there.
nuts. And so yeah, it's very science fiction-y. It's getting
Mhm,
there to where science fiction is now reality, and
I
it's awesome to think about.
mhm.
I would agree. I would also, just from my own, just something that crossed my mind here in reading some of the chat, is we also, I think, if we're going to approach this with what I think we should, which is an open but skeptical mind with
Mhm.
everything that we see with this topic, is we want to be careful not to fall into the trap of automatically glomming on to these are extraterrestrials, because we honestly don't know. And I think
That's true.
there's a very good reason why they use that term, non-human intelligence, because that can mean a whole number of things. But I don't think it's by accident that they're using that term NHI instead of just simply saying extraterrestrial.
Right.
I think extraterrestrial is one possible explanation for at least some of them, but I don't think it should be the catch all. I think we should be
That's true.
careful not to put all of our eggs in that extraterrestrial basket, because it could be something else. And I just wouldn't want to set ourselves up for disappointment if some of these things end up being of more of an interdimensional nature, whatever that happens to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
It could be this crypto-terrestrial hypothesis that some people talk about, that Hal Puthoff and Mac Tonys have talked about, where maybe there is this hitherto unknown intelligent civilization that is native to our own planet, but for whatever reason, because of their advanced technology and understanding of physics, they're largely able to remain separated and unknown to us. And that may be why we keep, there's these accounts all throughout history, and even going back to the ancient petroglyphs, we
Yep.
can see depictions of these strange beings. And so I prefer not to attach myself to saying this is all aliens, because it could be something else equally extraordinary as extraterrestrial, but not necessarily, but at the same time, I want people to understand I'm not saying that it's definitely not extraterrestrials. I'm just saying extraterrestrials is just one possible scenario. And
Yep.
that's,
Amen.
again, that's just my two
No, I
cents.
totally agree with you 100% because, and I like that non-human intelligence because we just simply don't know. And now we're getting into when you watch, Skinwalker Ranch and you're talking about interdimensional portals, possibility of that existing and all this kind of thing. Yeah,
Right.
we don't know. They could be something that lives right here amongst us, but they're just out
Right.
of phase with us just a little bit, and that's why you don't see them. I
Yeah.
mean, we are
Who's
just
who
infants in this whole thing, aren't we?
Yeah, like Dustin was saying, some of these, have that, Doctor Who, the TARDIS type thing, where space, it's just a telephone booth. You step inside and bam, there's this, you know,
Yeah.
um, who's to say we're not dealing, with artificial intelligence or machine intelligence? I mean, how
Yeah.
crazy would it be to find out that Transformers, Autobots, and Decepticons are,
Yeah,
who
I mean, I'm
knows?
laughing, but yes, I mean, that's
Yeah.
true. They could
we
be.
just don't know how, quote unquote, life. I mean, we still can't even really come to a consensus scientifically on what life actually is. And so maybe our definition of life is what needs to be adjusted, as well as, some of these other things, because, you know, I've said it before. I think that consciousness, whatever, what we collectively would refer as consciousness, that may be the most predominant life form in the universe. And maybe consciousness isn't always biological, it could be machine based, because we don't know where life elsewhere in the universe, how it may have evolved. And so, yeah, one more thing to, wow,
That's
what
a whole nother show to go into.
it is. It's
Absolutely.
probably a couple of shows. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, and that's the thing is because I look at these and I've seen the ones that I saw from the past were not so tiny. The ones I've seen in the since then, have been very tiny. At least in the perspective of when the one was on the camera, it was hard to tell how far it was from the camera. That was the distance thing. You couldn't get a good perspective on that. But I think that now that we're getting more and more, everybody's carrying one of these around. And, the thing is why didn't you film it? Oh, I forgot. I was so fascinated by what I was seeing. I forgot. I hope that's not me because I want to get the camera out and be, if it's, lingering long enough if it wasn't
Yeah.
gone that quickly, I want to be able to record it. But, wow. I tell you, this has been
Wow.
fascinating. It really has. Dustin, I can't
This
tell
is
you, I am
yes.
so honored to have you on the show and have you, you got to come back.
I'm honored to be here. Like I said, Jeff, I've been chomping at the bit to be on the show, and I'm glad you reached out. And yeah, this is awesome.
We got to get Ben on
Anytime you
here.
guys need me,
Yeah, you and Ben. We got to get you and Ben on
get
here.
Ben on
We
here.
got to, and I'm sure Ben has probably, and you probably have a lot more evidence that you could share.
Oh
yeah.
yeah. We have more cases we can go by. So anytime you guys need me, MUFON and DustinEskelsen.com if you want to join the socials, and yeah, let's get some answers.
This has been awesome, Jeff. Truly, I've really enjoyed this, and Dustin getting a chance to listen to you, and I would love to take you out to lunch sometime and just kind of pick your brain on some things. That would
Can I go too? I'll come with
that
you.
would be awesome.
100%. Yeah, I'll
I've
pass
got
along
to
my
treat
info
you to tacos. You haven't lived until you've had tacos with Jimm. So
the
Yeah,
Jimm tacos.
Jimm tacos. Yeah, we kept eating out at the taco truck at Phenomicon. That's a must do. Wow. All right. I'll tell you what, I got to wrap it up here. We're almost at the 2 hour mark, and that's when I cut it off. But this has been absolutely fascinating, Dustin. And Jimm, thank you for being here and helping I knew you would be the right person to bring into this to join us on this one. And hopefully we're going to get some disclosure. But I tell you what, until then, Dustin, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Keep doing your investigations, and I am so glad for you and for MUFON to be a place where people can go and talk about their experiences. That you guys actually seem to care and want to dig into it.
yeah,
We do.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, guys. This is
Thank you.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate it again. And like I said before, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you like the content that we gave you here this evening, please give us a thumbs up. And thank you, Craig, for the super sticker. I see that right there. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. And catch us next time. There will be more of these shows because you seen on my little video there that I am into all these different things, and I can't just keep it to one topic. I got to cover all this stuff. So click that notification bell because that way you'll know when we have good stuff coming out next time. So we'll catch you next time right here on the J Free 906 podcast and the Freeman Files. Good night, everyone.
See ya.